one.
Hi there, hello everyone, my name's Nick and I'm here in the Whipple Museum in Cambridge, or the Whipple Museum stores actually, and we're going behind the scenes to learn about some of the objects and the interesting things we've got here. We've got one very unusual object here which I'm looking forward to learning more about. All I know is it's got something to do with Scientology. So if you're into Scientology or history or science generally, then make sure you keep watching because I think you're going to find this very interesting indeed. I'll tell you what, let's just have a look at some of the things we've got in the stores here. Are we able just to have a look, Richard, and just swing around because it's a very interesting place. We're in here generally. Lots of different things. There we go. But as I say, we're going to be looking at this one here, this unusual case that we've got. But it's not me that's going to be talking about it. I've got an expert with me. And this is your chance actually to ask questions to an expert as well. We've got Josh now with us. So if you've got questions for Josh about this or about anything else that comes up, then make sure that you comment below and we'll put some of those questions to him as well. So Josh, should we have a look at this? Yeah, sure. Great.
So we've brought this out because it's part of an exhibition that we've currently got on called Why Is This Here?
Right.
Which explores some of the weirder and quirkier things in our collection. And this is actually the object that I first came across that made me want to put the exhibition together. Because I found it in the stores and I thought, that's an extraordinary thing. Let's open it up.
So this is like the weirdest and the quirkiest of the lot.
One of them, certainly.
Right.
So if we open this up, it's obviously a fairly impressive looking thing in here. We've got a very nice velvet lining. We've got
it's really nice.
Metal cans. Got some cables.
Right.
Power adapter. I'm not going to be plugging this in because I don't want to electrocute you.
Right, I don't want to be electric. It would make good viewing though. I'm sure more people would share it. But
and then this is the object itself. So the Whipple Museum, I mean, we have thousands and thousands of different scientific instruments in our collection, and my job is to be curator of those instruments. Yeah. And this is certainly one of the more curious things that we have. It certainly looks like a scientific instrument,
right?
But you can see it says here Hubbard Professional Mark 6.
Right.
Hubbard is L. Ron Hubbard.
Yes.
So this gives you an indication that this isn't any ordinary scientific instrument. It might look like one, but it actually is what's called an E-meter.
Right.
And it's used by the Church of Scientology as part of their what they call auditing, their kind of assessment of members of the church.
So Hubbard, that's L. Ron Hubbard, who was like the founder of Scientology, right? Yeah. And you're saying this looks like a scientific object. So are you kind of saying that it's not a scientific object? Is that fair, or am I reading too much into what you're saying?
I mean, it is and it isn't, and this is obviously something that depends in part on your beliefs. If you're a member of the Church of Scientology, they call it a spiritual artifact. They believe that it does do something scientific but also spiritual. They claim that what it does is measures mental mass and energy, which is basically arguing Hubbard claimed that thoughts have mass and that you can measure this and you can find spiritual unrest, even from past lives, by using this device. Now, I'll put my cards on the table. I'm not a Scientologist. Okay. I don't think this instrument or any instrument measures mental mass. That's my personal opinion. I don't think thoughts have mass. But I am interested in this because if you take a screwdriver to it and open them up, which there are people online who've done this if you Google it, it is a scientific instrument of sorts. It contains a Wheatstone bridge, which is a device for measuring variable resistance, and it contains amplifiers and it contains this moving coil. And what you actually do, Nick, is you plug it in, you attach cables from the device to these two cans,
right? And
you would hold these two cans in your hands, and this needle would start moving. And I would start asking you questions, and maybe I ask you a difficult question or an awkward question, and the needle might fluctuate. Now, in my opinion, what the device does, and the opinion of electrical engineers online, if you ask them, is it's actually measuring the resistance of the human body to current and passing a current through you. Human body's resistance is about 10,000 ohms, 10 to 12,000 ohms. As you change your grip on the cans, or as you sweat, as your muscles move, the resistance in your body changes slightly, and so the needle fluctuates. And so it does appear when you're asked an awkward question, like there's a response. And actually what's intriguing is that this technology, this use of a Wheatstone bridge with amplifiers to test the resistance of the body, is basically exactly the same technology that's used in a polygraph lie detector test. It's one of the same things. And Hubbard really got this design from the people in the 1950s who were developing the first lie detector tests. And lie detector tests have other components to them, but one of the things that they do measure is human resistance.
Well, this is like, I've got about a million things I want to ask about this. Now, remember, if you've got any questions or comments or anything like that, please do share them, and we'll put them to Josh. Do like and share this as well, because we want lots of people to see this video. We want lots of people to get the chance to go behind the scenes and see into the Whipple Museum stores and see what we've got here. So do share it as well if you're enjoying this. So hang on. So just to get this clear, so if I was being audited, so what is an audit, by the way? What do you mean by that in relation to Scientology? So
well, again, I'm no expert on the Church of Scientology. Right. It's a way that they assess members of the church, and they're asking them questions, and they claim that this is a form of kind of spiritual guidance that by testing for disturbances in your past, say, they can give you guidance. Now, the question here, of course, is this sounds a little bit like potentially something that you could closely associate with psychiatry.
Yeah.
So is this a medical device? Well, that's an interesting question, because this was tested legally in the courts in the United States in the 1970s. Right. The Church of Scientology were taken to court basically over the claim that this might be a medical device. And the result is that on the underside of these devices now is written the following, which I think is rather revealing. And this is by order, a 1974 US federal court order stipulates that they have to have this written on the device. And it says, by itself, this meter does nothing. It is solely for the guide of ministers in the church, in confessionals and pastoral counselling. The electrometer is not medically or scientifically useful for the diagnosis, treatment, or prevention of any disease. It is not medically or scientifically capable of improving the health or bodily functions of anyone, and is for the religious use by the students and ministers of the Church of Scientology only. So,
and has that got it? Is this on this one? Or
it's written
Can
on
we
the
have a
other.
look at that?
It's written.
Oh, there it is. So there we go. Maybe we can get a little close up of that, just so you can see that. Are you able to get in close, Rich?
There you go.
So it is there.
It's quite well hidden.
So they have a scientific object, but they have to put a disclaimer on it, essentially saying that it's not a scientific object.
So it's a really interesting object.
Fascinating.
For us as a museum, because, as I say, we have lots of history of science objects, but actually we don't just collect stuff that's kind of canonical, wonderful, brilliant instruments of famous experiments.
Yeah.
We're very keen on collecting stuff that we as historians can study and can tell us about the past. And so, for example, in the 19th century, there was a real fashion for what are called electromedical devices, which were these devices that you could once mains electricity came in, plug in, but before then they were generally, you would wind them up and it would use static electricity and then you would electrocute various parts of your body, and this was claimed to be medically, therapeutically helpful. And for the most part, we would now think that this sounds like, a load of old rubbish. But historians of medicine are very interested in the way in which, when new technologies like electricity come along, they get incorporated into things like medical practice. And this is an example when the lie detector comes along and L. Ron Hubbard is founding a new religion. This is one of the kind of very early things he develops. So
what does this? When was this made? In the 1970s?
Well, this particular model, I think, is probably from maybe the 1990s, but they were first developed by Hubbard in, I think, the late 50s, early 60s.
Yeah. So what more does this tell us about the 50s? What can we learn from the fact that this was in existence?
Well, I think Scientology, the name alone, indicates that the idea of incorporating science into religion was something that Hubbard was very keen on.
Yeah.
And so he's always and the Church of Scientology have always played up they describe it as spiritual technology, which they claim is somehow kind of better than. For example, I think they're highly critical of psychiatry, kind of talking cures. They think that it's better using technology. I would argue that there's potentially deception going on here, and I don't think that necessarily they're being entirely open about what this machine doesn't do. That's my opinion, and people in the church.
Yeah, of course.
But certainly for us in a museum, it's interesting to study not just kind of well-known famous objects, but kind of curious objects like this. And I think a historian in a couple of hundred years' time might be particularly intrigued to kind of have a look at this device, maybe open it up, get a screwdriver, have a look at what is and isn't inside, how it was put together.
Can I just stop you there, Josh? Just to say, we had a comment linked to what you're saying from Keith saying, "Hello, what a great job you and all of our museums, big and small, are doing preserving our history and heritage."
Well, thank you very much, Keith.
Lovely. Again, keep commenting, keep asking us questions, and we'll put them to Josh. So are there any other... is this a bit of a one-off, or are there other sort of objects and things like this that have that similar sort of vibe of trying to bring science or bring new technology or new ideas into sort of a different capacity? Like,
yeah, I mean,
Muhammad did with this, and with trying to bring it into religion, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, broadly speaking, in terms of kind of the way that science is incorporated into other areas of society and culture, we've got all kinds of interesting objects. We don't just collect lab objects. We collect anything that relates to what we would say is the scientific enterprise, and we consider that very broadly. So one of the reasons that we put the exhibition together that this object is currently in, so if you come to the museum you can see this object on display. The exhibition is called Why Is This Here? And this was the first object that I came across where I tried to think, how would I get it on display?
Yeah.
Like, what kind of exhibition would it go into? It's rather a one-off curiosity, it seems. But actually, then I thought, well, the obvious way to display it is alongside lots of other things within the collection, that when you come across them, you might think to yourself, why is this here?
Yeah, why is this? Yeah.
Being a curator in a collection like this, it's one of the real pleasures of kind of moving around these stores, is it's a really diverse collection. It's not like, an art gallery, you're like, you've got paintings, prints, photographs framed. You know what you're getting when you walk into the stores. In these stores, all kinds of things you just come across, and I literally just came across this on a shelf one day. I mean, it is catalogued, it's in there, but I just remember finding it and thinking, I've got to open that up and have a look.
Yeah.
So the display is full of other objects from the collection that similarly got us thinking, like, this is really weird, this is quirky. There's a tennis ball in there. There's these weird vials filled with water, from kind of muddy water from the 19th century. There's what appear to be knitted socks. All of these things are in the collection, and they all have different interesting, quirky stories. And actually we picked out the ones, all of which we thought in different ways show why it's worthwhile collecting history of science objects that aren't... I mean, obviously everyone would argue, well, it's worthwhile if you've got, one of the prisms that Isaac Newton used in his optical experiments or whatever. But for historians of science, we actually often prefer to study things that are a little bit more kind of on the edges.
Yeah, so there you go. So if you want to see more objects like this, then you need to get to Cambridge and go to the Whipple Museum and see the exhibition. Have we got any more questions or comments or anything? What have we got?
So we have a question, it's just come in from Humphrey. He says, given that the e-meter reading is dependent on unconscious changes in grip and sweat, would it be fair to call the e-meter an electronic Ouija board?
An electronic Ouija board? Oh,
yeah, I hadn't ever thought of that, but that is an interesting point. I have never personally used a Ouija board, but again, a Ouija board is another thing. If you ask me, I'm a fairly kind of scientifically minded person. I don't actually think that dead people from the past are speaking to us through Ouija boards, but there's always been this question about how do they work. Things start moving in curious ways, and one of the explanations, again, is exactly like this, that maybe it's because fairly unconsciously, as you're changing your position and your grip on things start moving. So it's reasonably similar, but I think in this case, what's interesting about it is that it's very similar, as I say, to another scientific technology which is also controversial, which is the lie detector test. Because the lie detector, the polygraph lie detector machines, for example, they're not allowed as legal evidence in courts in Britain, but I believe in certain states in the United States, for example, they are. And so there's some controversy about how this kind of testing, sensing of the body's response to questions does tell you something meaningful.
Yeah.
Because obviously, if someone asks you a question, a difficult question, and you're lying in your response, the argument is that you might sweat more, you might grip more tightly, and that a device like this and a device like a polygraph can sense that. But it's very controversial because certainly, for example, if it was to be used in a court of law, you would want it to be pretty much near 100% accurate. So the argument is that polygraphs aren't.
Yeah, and they're used all the time on Jeremy Kyle as well, aren't they?
Are they? That's news to me.
So what sort of, I know you're not a Scientology expert, but can you give us an idea of what are the sort of questions that might make what sort of things they're asking that are going to make people's hands sweat or make them, do you know what I mean? When they do use these.
When I was researching this, I had to write a label for it. I had to write about why I thought it was interesting, and it was a challenging job because one of the obvious problems we might face is that if you put a thing like this on display, someone comes in and says, well, that shouldn't be in a History of Science museum, like that's ridiculous, it's not a scientific instrument. So I really kind of tried to do a deep dive, and one of the things you find on YouTube is there are a number of different videos of people who've been in the Church of Scientology but have come out of it and rejected it, talking about their experience of it, and they say that you're asked kind of difficult, awkward questions about your past, about potentially embarrassing things. So in much the same way that with a polygraph test you might start to sweat, you might start to feel uneasy. I think it's those kind of things, but I have to say I'm not.
No, that's all right. And then the other thing I'm wondering about is we've got various different sort of buttons here, like one that says trim, and sort of this number, dial, these things here. Again, what are these doing exactly? Do you know?
Well, because it's measuring resistance. It contains a Wheatstone bridge with amplifiers. A Wheatstone bridge enables you to measure variably resistance. The resistance of everyone is going to be slightly different depending on how sweaty you are, what your muscle and fat body makeup are. So I think these are just so that you can get to a level of resistance that gives you kind of the movements that you want to see. Okay. So you might have a resistance of, say, 10,000 ohms. Your body, my body might have a resistance of, say, 11,000. So you need to, I mean, this is the thing, is that to use it, you do need to know what you're doing, which is one of the reasons why I'm not.
No, I do not want to be tested. And the other thing I think is it would be quite intimidating if you were presented this. It's in a really sort of heavy-going sort of case. This is really nice material. You can imagine this being sort of plonked down, being opened up, being taken out in this very sort of serious, quite intimidating, sort of dramatic sort of way, can't you?
Again, and that's why it's interesting to historians, to sociologists, people who want to study what the Church of Scientology are doing. I think the way that they present these devices is kind of telling of the kind of authority that they want to project.
But have we got any more? Yeah, Ina, have we got another comment or question?
Yeah, just a general one. Like, how did this instrument end up in the Whipple Museum?
Interesting question. So it was donated to us. That's all I can say, really. It was someone came in and gave it to us, and we take donations on a case-by-case basis. I wasn't actually the curator here when it was taken, so obviously they said, "Would you like to add this to your collection?" And at the time, the curators discussed it and said, "Actually, yes. No, that's an interesting object to accession into our collection." Now it's accession into the collection. It will be in the collection forever, in perpetuity. So, as I say, hopefully. The museum will be here in a couple of 100 years. I won't be, but hopefully this still will be, and people will be able to, historians of religion and of medicine will be able to come in and have a look at this.
Oh, it's so fascinating, isn't it? I hadn't even thought about how it could have been donated, but I guess the problem is I know you can't say, but it just seems fascinating to know how someone got their hands on this and then was like, actually, this needs to be in a museum. It's fascinating, isn't it? Have we got anything else? Any other comments or questions or anything that we want to put to Josh at all? No worries. Okay, well, make sure that you're liking and you're sharing this and you're commenting below, because as I say, we want as many people as possible to get the chance to go behind the scenes and to find out about this really quite fascinating Fascinating object indeed. Thanks so much for this, Josh.
My pleasure.
So the exhibition is still going on, isn't it?
Come into the Whipple 12:30 to 4:30 Monday to Friday, and you can see this and lots of other curious, strange things in the exhibition. Why is this here?
Fantastic. And remember to like the Facebook page. That's the Cambridge University Museum's Facebook page, because we'll be doing more live streams like this, going behind the scenes to different museums in Cambridge and revealing some of the unusual and interesting objects that they have there. So yeah, until next time, thanks very much and see you soon.